What makes a great sequel? There's a trend in Hollywood that as soon as a movie is a hit at the box office, the reaction amongst studio executives is how quick can we do it again? And it more often than not leads to a sequel or even a string of sequels of substandard quality. In order for a sequel to be successful, it realistically needs to do two things. First, to recapture the magic of what it was that made the first film so special, but also to expand on the story of the original and to further character development. And of course, the more popular the original film is, the more difficult a task it is for a sequel to live up to its standards. When Toy Story was released in 1995, it would truly change the landscape of the animated feature film. The very first entirely computer animated feature movie, Toy Story truly looked like nothing before seen on the big screen, and was the first feature-length release from Pixar Studios, helping to launch the company to become the institution that it is today. The premise of the movie's plot was at first glance quite simple, set in a world where toys come alive and communicate with each other as soon as their owners aren't around. However, the way the story focused on the dynamics of the relationship between the toys, their emotions and feelings, and where they fit into their owner's world, made it a movie that caught the imaginations of both children and adults alike. Toy Story was praised for its innovative use of 3D animation, its impressive screenplay, iconic soundtrack, and the performance of its voice cast. Huge success at the box office and an extremely popular toy line meant that a sequel to Toy Story in some form was probably inevitable. However, initial plans were only for a direct-to-video sequel, a trend which was popular at the time with parent company Disney, who would often follow popular, successful 90s titles with an inferior direct-to-video sequel release. At this point, Pixar were in the middle of production of their second feature film, A Bug's Life, and it was unclear if a proposed Toy Story sequel would feature the original voice cast, or if it would even be computer animated like the original, or simply hand-drawn in 2D animation. It's probably safe to say at this point, expectations around a Toy Story sequel would have been quite low. Couple this with a troubled production which included a changing of the production team, and a year's worth of work on the movie almost being lost forever when an animator accidentally deleted files containing the team's work up to that point. However, despite all this, when executives at Disney were shown early reels of the movie, they felt it was good enough to push for a theatrical release. So after such an uncertain and troubled production process, coupled with the pressure of following up a movie as wildly successful and acclaimed as Toy Story, you would presume that the sequel would inevitably be a huge letdown. Well, actually it would be the absolute and complete opposite. As mentioned earlier in the video, one of the strongest aspects of Toy Story was the way its screenplay made you care for its characters. Pardon the pun, but it literally made toys come to life with feelings and emotions. Not only does Toy Story 2 manage to recapture this spirit, it expands on it and actually adds even more depth to the film's characters. The plot of Toy Story 1 mainly focused on the strained relationship between Woody and Buzz, as each character deals with their own personal conflicts. Woody struggles to cope with rejection and the fact that he's no longer Andy's favourite toy, while Buzz has to come to terms with the realisation that he is a toy and not an actual space ranger. In Toy Story 2, the plot expands further on Woody's insecurities, as he contemplates the reality that Andy is getting older and won't want to play with him forever. The concept of being left on the shelf terrifies Woody, and after he's stolen from a yard sale and put in a collection with Jessie, Bullseye and the Prospector, he finds himself facing a decision of whether to stay and enjoy his final few years with Andy before he grows up, or to go with the rest of the collection to a museum in Japan, where he'll never be played with again, but will be appreciated by human eyes for the rest of his existence. Not only does the movie's plot delve further into Woody's backstory as we learn about his origins with the Roundup gang, it also adds layers to the human-like emotions that these toys feel. The fear of being broken and therefore no longer being of any purpose really feels quite profound. It definitely feels like there's a more mature tone to the plot of Toy Story 2 in comparison to its predecessor, as it deals with the question, what do you do when your original reason to live and find joy in life is no longer there? As well as expanding the character development of the existing characters from the first movie, Toy Story 2 also successfully adds a number of new characters to the story, all of whom are instrumental to the plot. After Woody is stolen from the yard sale, he's placed with the rest of the Roundup gang and we are introduced to Jessie, the Prospector and Bullseye. Director John Lasseter has mentioned that he was encouraged by his wife to add a strong female character to the story, and Jessie's presence plays a big part in the movie's plot. When Woody remarks that Jessie doesn't understand what it's like to have a kid like Andy, she reveals her past in one of the franchise's most heartbreaking and emotional scenes, describing how she once had an owner who outgrew her, and was eventually abandoned at the side of the road, leaving Jessie emotionally scarred and also suffering from claustrophobia after spending years in storage. That fear of being left on the shelf which Woody feels at the beginning of the movie is perfectly projected through Jessie, a character who has experienced firsthand every toy's worst nightmare, being abandoned and no longer serving a purpose, and whose heartbreaking backstory really drives home the movie's ability to make the audience care for these toys' feelings and emotions. Jessie is one of a number of new characters introduced in Toy Story 2. The majority of the human characters in Toy Story 1 spend very little time on screen, with the possible exception of Sid, who really serves as the movie's main villain, torturing and maiming his toys until he eventually gets what's coming to him. In Toy Story 2, the majority of screen time for a human goes to Al, also known as the man in the chicken suit, a toy collector and proud owner of Al's Toy Barn, voiced by the wonderful Wayne Knight. While perhaps not as psychotic as Sid, Al is clearly a very bad person and motivated by greed. He willingly steals a child's toy despite being told that it's not for sale, and that it's a toy with sentimental value for the family. The inclusion of Al as the sequel's villain is interesting and feels like part of a way to expand the universe that these toys exist in. During the first movie, their biggest fear was ending up on the wrong side of the garden fence, where they would be at risk of being tortured by Sid. However, the idea of someone like Al being able to take one of the toys away to an entirely different location opens up the universe as the toys have to set out on an adventure to get Woody back to Andy's house. Toy Story 2's other villain, Stinky Pete, is also an interesting addition to the sequel. The Prospector is the first time we see a toy who could be described as a bad guy or villain. However, his backstory makes him a far more complex character than just a traditional movie villain. A lifetime of being left on the shelf of a toy store, and then years packed away in storage leaves him resentful and bitter, unable to trust human behaviour, and willing to take away Woody's choice of where he will spend the rest of his days in order to secure his own future at the museum. Along with the introduction of Jessie, adding these toys who have difficult pasts really enhances the plot, and furthers the story from the original movie as we get to see a broader view into this world of toys that the original movie created. One of the greatest aspects of the original Toy Story was its soundtrack, composed by Randy Newman. Tracks such as Strange Things and You've Got a Friend in Me captured the spirit of the movie perfectly, and became iconic tracks in their own right. Newman was again hired to compose the Toy Story 2 soundtrack, and again manages to give the film an iconic score, with the song When She Loved Me the perfect backdrop to the film's saddest scene, as Jessie reveals her traumatic past. Although there are only 4 years between the release dates of Toy Story 1 and Toy Story 2, there's certainly a clear advance in the animation between the two movies. When Toy Story 1 was released, it was the first of its kind in using computer animation, and truly broke the mold for how animated feature films could look on the big screen. However, the limitations of the technology at the time meant the production team were careful with the amount of different locations they could include in the script, as well as the type of camera angles and movements they could utilize. So while the original movie's setting is based almost entirely between Andy's house and Sid's next door, the advances in technology by Toy Story 2 allow for far greater scope, with exterior settings, the scene at Al's Toy Barn, and even as far as the airport, with these scenes at the baggage control really showing off the ability of Pixar's increasing capabilities. So was Toy Story 2 a good sequel? Honestly, I think Toy Story 2 belongs on any list of great movie sequels. It doesn't just manage to capture everything that was so great about the first movie, but it truly expands the universe that the original movie was set in, and also manages to add more depth to the development of existing characters' story arcs, as well as introducing new characters who help to further the plot with their own story arcs. Pretty much everything that a great sequel should do. The fact that there's often a debate as to what the better Toy Story movie is really speaks volumes about Toy Story 2's strength as a sequel. And given that it had such a troubled production process, the quality of the finished product is truly remarkable. The sequel's success would lead to Toy Story becoming a movie franchise, including a third and fourth feature-length movie as well as a number of shorts. Inspired by the original concept of the 1988 Pixar short Tin Town, it's a movie franchise that would truly go to infinity and beyond. If you enjoyed the video, please make sure to like, subscribe and hit the notification bell to see future videos.